An elderly woman at the funeral home shouted, "That's not my son in the casket. Where is his body?" The viewing room went silent, except for Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore's voice echoing off the chapel walls. She was standing 3 feet from the open casket, trembling, one finger pointed at the body inside like she was identifying a criminal in a lineup. "That is not my Thomas," she said again, louder this time. "Someone tell me where my son is." I was standing by the door with my clipboard, doing what I'd done for 3 years at Riverside Memorial Funeral Home, making sure the family had everything they needed, that the flowers were arranged properly, that the sound system worked for the eulogy. Standard stuff. But this wasn't standard. This was a 78-year-old woman in a black dress, insisting the body we'd prepared, embalmed, dressed, and presented wasn't her son. My first instinct was to step in gently, to calm her down, to explain that grief does strange things to perception. But something in her voice stopped me. It wasn't hysteria. It wasn't confusion. It was certainty. Cold, clear certainty that made my stomach drop before I even understood why. I'd been working at Riverside Memorial for 3 years, ever since I graduated from mortuary science school at 24. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and my boss, Leonard Voss, had promised me I'd eventually take over the business when he retired. Leonard was 61, had been running the funeral home for 32 years, and knew everyone in town. He was respected, trusted, the kind of guy people called when their loved ones died, because they knew he'd handle everything with dignity. I trusted him completely. Everyone did. Thomas Whitmore had died 5 days earlier from a heart attack at age 53. His mother had come in to make arrangements, and I'd sat with her while she picked out the casket, chose the flowers, selected the suit he'd be buried in. She'd been composed then, sad, but clear-headed. She'd brought in a photo of Thomas from his 40th birthday, smiling, dark hair, strong jawline. "Make him look like this," she'd said. "I want people to remember him happy." I'd assured her we would. Leonard had done the embalming personally, something he always did for prominent families. The Whitmores weren't wealthy, but they'd been in Riverside for generations. Thomas had been a high school teacher, beloved by students. The funeral was expected to be well attended. Now Mrs. Whitmore was backing away from the casket, shaking her head, repeating, "That's not him. That's not him." Thomas's wife, Patricia, rushed over and grabbed her arm. "Eleanor, please, you're upset. Let's sit down." But Mrs. Whitmore yanked her arm free. "Don't tell me I don't know my own son. I carried him for 9 months. I raised him for 53 years. I know every scar, every freckle, every line on his face, and that man in the casket is not Thomas." The room was full of people, relatives, friends, former students, all staring now, all silent. Patricia looked at me desperately, like I was supposed to fix this. I moved toward them, keeping my voice low and calm. "Mrs. Whitmore, I understand this is difficult. Sometimes the embalming process changes certain features slightly. The lighting in here can also—" She cut me off. "I know what my son looks like. That man's nose is wrong. His ears are wrong. His hands are wrong. Even his height looks wrong." She turned to Patricia. "You see it too, don't you? Tell me you see it." Patricia hesitated. I watched her face cycle through emotions: grief, confusion, fear. She looked at the body, really looked, and something shifted in her expression. "The hands," she said quietly. "Thomas had a scar on his left hand from a table saw accident in high school, right across the palm." She moved closer to the casket, leaned over, lifted the left hand. I saw her face go white. "There's no scar." The room erupted. People started moving toward the casket, talking over each other, demanding to know what was happening. I stepped in front of Mrs. Whitmore and Patricia, trying to maintain some kind of order, but my mind was racing. I'd helped dress that body. I'd positioned the hands. I hadn't noticed a scar, but I also hadn't been looking for one. Bodies look different after embalming. Features settle, colors change. But a scar doesn't just disappear. I pulled out my phone and texted Leonard, who was in his office. "Emergency in Whitmore viewing room. Family says body isn't correct. Need you now." He appeared 2 minutes later, moving through the crowd with practiced calm, his hands raised in a gesture that said everything would be fine. This was all a misunderstanding. "Folks, please, let's all take a breath. Mrs. Whitmore, Patricia, I understand you're concerned. Let me take a look." He approached the casket and examined the body carefully, his face giving nothing away. Then he turned to them with a sympathetic expression I'd seen him use 100 times. "I can assure you this is Thomas. I prepared him myself. The embalming process can change certain features, make people look slightly different than they did in life. The scar you're referring to may have been obscured by the cosmetic work we did to make him look peaceful." Mrs. Whitmore wasn't buying it. "I want to see the records. I want to see the identification tags. I want proof this is my son." Leonard's smile didn't waver. "Of course. I'll bring everything to my office and we can review it together. In the meantime, perhaps we should postpone the viewing until we've had a chance to address your concerns privately." The guests were ushered out. I helped clear the room while Leonard took Mrs. Whitmore and Patricia to his office. I could hear their voices through the wall, Mrs. Whitmore insistent, Leonard soothing, Patricia caught somewhere in between. After 20 minutes, they emerged. Leonard was holding a file folder. "I've shown them the death certificate, the hospital transfer paperwork, and our internal identification logs. Everything matches. Thomas Whitmore, age 53, died at Riverside General on October 18th. Body transferred here on the 19th. Embalmed on the 20th. Everything is in order. Mrs. Whitmore looked beaten down, but not convinced. I know what I saw, she said quietly. That's not my son. Leonard put a hand on her shoulder. Grief can do terrible things to our perception. I've seen it many times. You want Thomas to still be alive, so your mind is looking for reasons to believe he isn't in that casket? But he is. And he's at peace. Let me help you say goodbye properly. She left with Patricia, both of them silent. The viewing was rescheduled for the next day. After they were gone, I went back to the preparation room to check the records myself. Everything was there, exactly as Leonard said. Death certificate signed by Dr. Raymond Cutler at Riverside General. Transfer paperwork with Thomas Whitmore's name, date of birth, date of death. Our internal intake form with measurements, identifying marks, personal effects. In the identifying marks section, there was a notation. Scar, left palm, approximately 3 inches, horizontal. I stared at that line. Leonard had noted the scar during intake, which meant he'd seen it when the body arrived, which meant it should still be there. Embalming doesn't erase scars. I pulled out my phone and called my friend Angela Reeves, who worked as a nurse at Riverside General. Angela, weird question. Do you remember a patient named Thomas Whitmore dying there last week? Heart attack? She paused. Yeah, I remember. 53, right? Came in unconscious. Didn't make it. Why? Did you see the body after he died? Do you remember anything distinctive about him? Another pause. I mean, I wasn't in the room when he passed, but I remember his wife was there. She was devastated. Why are you asking? I didn't want to explain over the phone. Just checking something for the family. Thanks. I hung up and went to find Leonard. He was in his office, door closed. I knocked. No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. That was unusual. Leonard never locked his office during business hours. I was about to walk away when I heard voices inside. Not Leonard's voice. Multiple voices, muffled, coming from his computer speakers. I pressed my ear to the door and heard what sounded like a video conference. One voice I didn't recognize said, "How many this month?" Leonard responded, 4, including the Whitmore situation. The other voice, "The mother is going to be a problem." Leonard, "I handled it. She'll drop it." A third voice, woman, older. "You need to be more careful with the identifications. This is the second family that's noticed." Leonard, "It won't happen again." The conversation ended. I backed away from the door before he could come out. My hands were shaking. 4, what? What identifications? What was the Whitmore situation? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that scar, about Mrs. Whitmore's certainty, about the locked door and the voices on the computer. At 2 in the morning, I got up and drove back to the funeral home. I had keys to the building. I'd often arrived early or stayed late to handle paperwork. The parking lot was empty. I let myself in through the back entrance and went straight to the preparation room. Thomas Whitmore's body was in cold storage, waiting for tomorrow's viewing. I pulled open the drawer, my heart hammering. The face looked peaceful, professional. Leonard's work was always immaculate. I lifted the left hand. No scar. The palm was smooth, unblemished, but our intake form said there should be a scar. I checked the right hand. Nothing. I pulled back the sheet and looked at the body more carefully. The height seemed right. The build seemed right. The hair color matched. But there was something off about the proportions. The legs seemed slightly too short for the torso. The shoulders seemed slightly too narrow for the head. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the photo Mrs. Whitmore had given us, Thomas at 40. I compared it to the face in front of me. The nose was similar, but not identical. The jawline was close, but slightly different. The ears were completely wrong. Thomas's ears in the photo stuck out slightly. This body's ears were flat against the head. I felt sick. I took photos of the body, then closed the drawer and went to Leonard's office. The door was still locked, but I had master keys for emergencies. I unlocked it and went inside. His desk was organized, professional. Nothing out of place. But I knew what I was looking for. I opened his computer and found it password protected. I tried his birthday. Nothing. I tried the funeral home's founding date. Nothing. Then I tried Riverside 1991, the year he took over the business. It worked. The desktop opened. I went straight to his email and started searching for anything related to Thomas Whitmore. What I found made my blood run cold. There were emails going back 6 months to an address I didn't recognize. dkovach@greystonemedical.com. Mail to dkovach@greystonemedical.com. The subject lines were coded. Delivery schedule, inventory update, payment confirmation. I opened the most recent one, dated the day after Thomas Whitmore died. Received, 1 male, Caucasian, age 50 to 55, excellent condition. Payment transferred. Next delivery? Leonard's response, confirmed. Whitmore replacement ready for viewing. Next available. Female, age 60 to 65, November 3rd. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was reading. Delivery? Replacement? Payment? I opened another email from 3 months ago. Your discretion is appreciated. Our research facility requires fresh specimens that meet specific criteria. Your location and expertise make you an ideal partner. Payment is competitive and immediate upon receipt. Leonard's response: Understood. I can provide 3 to 4 per month depending on availability. Need guarantee of no investigation on your end. The response: Our facility operates with complete confidentiality. Bodies are used for medical research under proper licensing. No one will ask questions. I opened more emails. Dozens of them. A whole system laid out in digital paper trail. Leonard would receive bodies from the hospital or from home deaths. He would embalm and prepare a substitute body. Someone unclaimed, someone from out of state, someone whose family wouldn't notice or wouldn't push back. Then he would sell the original body to this Greystone medical facility for research. The families would bury the substitute. No one would know. The payments were substantial, $15,000 per body. In 6 months, Leonard had made over $300,000. I felt like I was going to throw up. I took photos of every email with my phone. Then I searched for Whitmore in his files and found a folder with intake photos, real intake photos, showing Thomas Whitmore's actual body when it arrived from the hospital. In the photo, his left palm was clearly visible, a 3-inch horizontal scar, exactly as described. I compared it to the body in cold storage. Different person. Completely different person. I copied everything I could onto a flash drive, then locked Leonard's office and left the building. I sat in my car in the parking lot, shaking, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't go to the police without proof. I had emails, but Leonard could claim they were forged. I had photos, but he could say I doctored them. I needed something more. I needed the real body. I needed to find out where Greystone Medical was and what they were doing with the bodies Leonard was selling them. At 5 a.m, I drove to Angela's apartment and woke her up. When she opened the door, I must have looked insane because she immediately pulled me inside. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, I said. I think I've been helping sell bodies for medical research without consent. I showed her everything, the emails, the photos, the intake form with the scar notation, the body in storage without the scar. She sat there on her couch, staring at my phone screen, and I watched her face change from confusion to horror to anger. You need to call the police, she said. Right now. I need more proof. I need to find the real body. Ethan, this is insane. You can't break into a medical research facility. You need to let the police handle this. But I knew the police would need a warrant. They'd need probable cause. And by the time they got it, Leonard would destroy the evidence. I could see it in those emails. He was careful, methodical. If he suspected I knew, he'd erase everything and disappear. I need to find Greystone Medical, I said. I need to know what they're doing with these bodies. Angela stared at me. Then she pulled out her laptop. Fine, but we do this smart. Let me search hospital databases. If they're a legitimate research facility, they'll have licensing, permits, something on record. She searched for 2 hours while I paced her apartment. Finally, she found it. Greystone Medical Solutions, licensed tissue procurement facility in Bakerstown, about 90 miles north. They're registered for educational and research purposes. They have contracts with several medical schools. I grabbed my keys. I'm going there. Ethan, you can't just walk into a research facility and demand to see their inventory. They'll call the police on you. Then I'll figure something else out. But I'm going. She grabbed my arm. Then I'm coming with you. You need a witness, and you need someone who understands medical terminology in case you actually find something. We drove to Bakerstown and arrived at Greystone Medical just after 8. The facility was a low, modern building on the outskirts of town, surrounded by chain-link fence. The sign out front said, Greystone Medical Solutions, authorized personnel only. We parked across the street and watched. At 8:30, a delivery truck pulled up to a side entrance. 2 men in scrubs unloaded a large container and wheeled it inside. That's a body transport container, Angela said quietly. Standard for moving remains. We waited another 30 minutes. Then Angela said, I have an idea. Stay here. She got out of the car and walked up to the front entrance. I watched her talk to someone through the intercom, then the door opened and she went inside. I sat there for 20 minutes, my heart pounding, wondering if I'd just let her walk into danger. Then she came back out, moving quickly, and got in the car. Drive, now. I drove. When we were a mile away, she said, I told them I was from the nursing program at State College, and we were looking for a tissue procurement partner for our anatomy labs. They gave me a tour. She pulled out her phone. I took photos of everything I could, including their intake log. She showed me the photos. Room after room of stainless steel tables, refrigeration units, processing equipment. And there, in one photo, a clipboard with handwritten entries. I zoomed in on the most recent one. October 19th, male, age 53, Whitmore, T, Riverside Memorial, dissection study. Thomas Whitmore. Delivered the day after he died. Still here. We need to call the police right now, Angela said. I nodded and dialed. The call was answered by a dispatcher who transferred me to Detective Isaiah Brennan, head of the Criminal Investigations Division. I'd met him once at a community event. He was in his mid-50s, 28 years on the force, reputation for being thorough. I explained everything. The elderly woman's accusation, the missing scar, the emails, Greystone Medical, the intake log. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then he said, "Where are you right now?" "Bakerstown, outside the facility." "Stay there. Don't go anywhere. Don't do anything. I'm sending units now." 45 minutes later, 3 police cars and an unmarked sedan pulled up. Detective Brennan got out and walked over to my car. "Show me everything you have." I showed him the photos on my phone, the emails, the intake forms, the comparison between Thomas Whitmore's actual intake photo and the body currently in our cold storage. He studied each image carefully, his jaw getting tighter. "How many bodies are we talking about?" "Based on the emails, at least 20 in the past 6 months." He nodded slowly. "And you're certain the body at your funeral home is not Thomas Whitmore?" "Positive. Different facial structure, different ears. No scar on the left palm." He called over one of the officers. "Get a warrant for Greystone Medical. I want access to their intake logs and cold storage. And get another warrant for Riverside Memorial Funeral Home. Full search, all records, all remains currently on site." Then he looked at me. "You're either a whistleblower or an accomplice. Which is it?" "Whistleblower. I had no idea any of this was happening until yesterday." "Then you're going to give a formal statement. Everything you know. Every detail." I spent the next 3 hours at the Riverside Police Department giving my statement to Detective Brennan and Assistant District Attorney Carolyn Vance, a sharp woman in her early 40s with 15 years as a prosecutor. She asked questions I hadn't even thought of. How long had I worked there? Had I ever noticed irregularities before? Had Leonard ever asked me to falsify documents? Had I ever seen bodies that didn't match their paperwork? I answered everything honestly. No, I'd never noticed anything until Mrs. Whitmore's outburst. No, Leonard had never asked me to do anything illegal. Yes, looking back, there had been a few families who'd seemed uncertain about identifications, but Leonard had always explained it away as grief-related confusion. "How did he choose which bodies to switch?" Carolyn asked. I'd thought about this. Based on the emails, he targeted people who died alone or unexpectedly, people whose families were in shock and wouldn't scrutinize the body too carefully. He avoided anyone with large families or anyone well-known in the community. Thomas Whitmore was a mistake. His mother was too sharp, too certain. Detective Brennan came back into the room. We executed the warrant at Greystone, found 14 bodies in cold storage, including Thomas Whitmore, all of them delivered from Riverside Memorial in the past 2 months. The facility director claims they had no idea the bodies weren't properly consented. They thought Leonard had legal authority to sell unclaimed remains for research. "Do you believe him?" Carolyn asked. Carolyn. Brennan shrugged. "Doesn't matter what I believe. Greystone has documentation showing they paid fair market value and received paperwork claiming the bodies were legally sourced. They might be guilty of inadequate due diligence, but proving they knew about the fraud is going to be hard." "What about Leonard?" "We executed the warrant at the funeral home, found 3 substitute bodies in cold storage, all scheduled for burials this week. We also found his computer, his files, and about $80,000 in cash hidden in his office wall." Brennan sat down across from me. "He's in custody. He's not talking. But we have enough evidence to charge him with fraud, desecration of human remains, and theft. The families of everybody he sold are being notified." The news broke that evening. Local reporter Diana Frost from Channel 6 ran a story. "Riverside Funeral Home Director arrested for selling bodies." By morning, it was national news. CNN, FOX, NBC, everyone wanted the story. Reporters camped outside the funeral home. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore gave an interview where she said, "I knew my son. I knew that wasn't him in the casket, and everyone told me I was crazy." The community was in shock. People started calling the police saying they wanted their loved ones' graves exhumed to verify identifications. Families who'd buried people in the past year were hysterical, demanding answers. The district attorney's office set up a hotline. Within 3 days, they'd received over 200 calls. Detective Brennan called me a week later. "We've identified 23 substitute bodies that were buried. We're exhuming them all and running DNA tests to figure out who they actually are. The real bodies have been recovered from Greystone. We're in the process of returning them to their families." "What about Leonard?" I asked. "He took a plea deal, 40 years in prison. He admitted to everything. Turns out he's been doing this for 8 years, not 6 months. The emails I found were from a new contact. His previous buyer went out of business 2 years ago. We're estimating he sold over 200 bodies." I felt sick. 200 families, 200 people buried in the wrong graves, 200 real bodies sold for research without consent. "The families are suing his estate," Brennan continued. "Everything he owns is going into a victim compensation fund. The funeral home is being shut down permanently, and you're probably going to be called as a witness at multiple trials." I was. Over the next year, I testified at Leonard's sentencing hearing, at civil trials for the families, and at the licensing board hearing that revoked his funeral director credentials posthumously. Every time, I had to relive finding those emails, seeing that body without the scar, understanding what had been happening under my nose for 3 years. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore attended Leonard's sentencing. When the judge asked if she wanted to make a victim impact statement, she stood up and said, I knew my son. And when I saw that body in the casket, I knew it wasn't him. Everyone told me I was wrong. Everyone told me grief was making me irrational. But a mother knows. And I want everyone in this room to understand that I will never get those days back. I will never get to see my real son one last time before he was buried. Because of this man's greed, I was forced to say goodbye to a stranger. The judge sentenced Leonard to 40 years without parole. He'll die in prison. Thomas Whitmore was returned to his family and buried properly. So were 22 other people whose families had buried substitutes. The remaining substitute bodies were identified through DNA and returned to their families. Some had been reported missing. Some were unclaimed from other states. All of them deserved better than being used as props in Leonard's scheme. I don't work in the funeral industry anymore. After everything came out, I couldn't walk into a preparation room without seeing those substitute bodies, without wondering how many times I'd helped dress someone who wasn't who the family thought they were. I went back to school and became a paralegal. I work for a firm that handles wrongful death cases now. Sometimes I think about Mrs. Whitmore standing in that viewing room, pointing at the casket, saying, "That's not my son." Everyone thought she was losing her mind. Turned out she was the only one seeing clearly. The whole thing taught me something I'll never forget. Trust the people who know. Trust the mother who says that's not her child. Trust the wife who says something's wrong. Trust the instinct that says this doesn't make sense, even when everyone else is telling you to let it go. Because sometimes the elderly woman shouting in the funeral home isn't crazy. Sometimes she's the only one telling the truth. And if you're lucky, someone will actually listen before it's too late. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.